have a couple grown kids and some cats, and I live with bipolar disorder. I was formally diagnosed at 32, but I can see looking back that I had episodes starting in my mid-teens, and it was written off as typical teenage drama. I found substances that helped me cope and manage my moods when I was about 16. And for the 16 years after that, I developed and was treated for substance use disorders and addictions many times without much luck making it stick. Perhaps this was because we weren't exploring if there was any mental health disorders sprinting alongside the addictions for all of those treatments. But I was also resistant to the idea that there might be something wrong with my head. I was okay that the substances were making me crazy. That made sense to me. But I wasn't okay that without using any substances, there still might be something wrong with me. But the problems kept creeping back up, and I would return to the substances to manage my, quote, crazy, unquote, treat, relapse, and repeat. During these 16 years, I became a mother, and I absolutely loved this child, and I would do anything for them. I tried to manage my substance use disorder and keep my issues away from my kids, but you can imagine how much luck I had with that noble intention. And in 2003, I experienced a severe episode where my life unraveled and it had me pile drive into some pretty severe consequences. I went to my last treatment center, and it was gender specific, and it introduced me to trauma-informed treatment. It was substance use disorder, but once I got stabilized and there were no drugs in me, my head was still a little wonkier than other people's. It was suggested that I might want to get a mental health assessment, but I assured them that my brain was just trying to heal and find some equilibrium after all these episodes of binge drug use. It needed time to heal. I was convinced that my brain was just fine, but after about 6 months of recovery from substance use disorder, I still had much higher highs and much lower lows than most people. During my highs, I wouldn't sleep. I'd get immense ideas of how to improve things in the world, or clean the house 100 times, or make fabulous art. I would get immersed in these activities and stay up for days learning all the little nuances of my new interest. And then that would be followed by periods of intense sadness and ennui. And in those times, it was really hard to function, and it didn't seem like anything had any meaning. But I had these kids, and I was a single parent, and I didn't have a whole lot of support or people that I could count on to step in if I was slipping. And I realized that whatever was going on in my head was affecting my parenting. My kids were young. The oldest was about 5 at the time. But I feared that if I didn't do something, that this was going to affect them. I really didn't want that to happen, so I agreed to get the mental health assessment. And I sat for the hour that it takes to do the diagnostic assessment, and they asked me all the questions. And I'm pretty sure that the professionals dealing with me at the time knew what diagnosis they were going to come up with. But we checked all the boxes, and we went through the process, and they came up with a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. I did not like that diagnosis. I didn't like it one bit. I didn't like it because it means that I can be doing everything right. I can be totally off of illicit substances. I can be focused on self-care and healthy living. And I can wake up on any given day and my brain decides it is not going to be my friend today. I went through all the stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and back again several times. Bipolar disorder means that I live with this thing in my head. It's not something that I can choose to eliminate. Can't turn my back on it because the thing is me. I can't banish the bad energy from my life and uphold my boundaries because, again, it's me. It's my own head. It's my brain. And my brain is something I've been pretty proud of up until now. My brain is clever. It works out all the angles, and it has figured out how to stay alive even when the odds were never always in my favor. But wait, China, there's more. After they gave me the diagnosis of bipolar disorder, they read the diagnostic criteria straight out of the DSM, and I would listen and mentally mark a check next to each one and realize that my symptoms and behavior fit the criteria, and that made it a little easier to accept that they might be right about this. But after about 6 months, they informed me I had what's called bipolar 1. And bipolar 1, that means I have mania. Like true God mode mania, where holy shiaz, I have superpowers. And that sounds like a little bit of fun. Like they might make a Marvel superhero movie about me, because yes, I am that great. And it is kind of fun right up to the point where I start terrifying people and they have to start backing away from me slowly or quickly because my behavior scares them that someone might get hurt. Because they think someone's going to get arrested or go to jail soon if this keeps up. Because they can't watch me do what I do to myself when I'm in a manic state. Or just because it makes them uncomfortable and they don't understand what's going on. So I learned about bipolar 1 and what that means. And yeah, they're probably right about that one too. And I learned about the depression that follows the mania and sticks around for far longer than it's welcome. And then it was good for a little while longer, but then they added this one additional thing to my diagnosis. Ready for this? With psychotic features. Yeah, bipolar 1 with psychotic features. That means I'm 35 years of age, trying to hold it all together and thinking I'm doing a pretty good job of understanding my recovery from substance use disorder and mental illness pretty well, when they tell me I see and hear things that other people do not. And there is some serious stigma around the word psychotic. I had some serious internal bias and uneducated opinions of what psychotic people were like. I thought they were dangerous. I thought they were erratic. I thought they were rambling. And okay, I can be guilty of that sometimes. And I thought they could be ranting, and I can have a touch of that as well. I thought that psychotic people had command voices telling them to hurt the dog or kill the president or something like that. And I had to learn more in order to know more, and I had to know more if I wanted to do better. And I did want to do better. So I asked, what does psychotic features mean? And I learned that psychosis is much more common than I was aware of. In my case, psychotic features means that I sometimes see or hear or smell extra things that other people do not experience. I see colors more brightly when I'm up, and I see patterns connecting this thing to that thing. And I hear a running commentary of the things that are going on in my everyday life. In my case, this is a rather hysterical imaginary friend who adds narration to my regular interactions. And I have to all the time be careful of laughing at this person's insight because it's my secret friend and other people can't know about him or see him. I hear music like a radio channel that's playing in the background. And most of the time it's quite pleasant. Sometimes I see things like shadow people or strange creatures in my periphery. And if I'm going to be honest, I think they can see me too. But I honestly thought everybody else had this going on as well. So imagine my shock when my psychiatrist told me, no, China, most other people don't see or hear things that other people don't. Oh, that is a big pill to swallow. Then I can't trust my own brain to know what's real. So how am I supposed to know? My counselor told me to ask. This was a shocking revelation to me. I can't trust my own brain, and you want me to trust someone else to confirm or deny my perception of reality. That was scary to me, because my perception, as uneducated as it was back then, was that if I showed somebody vulnerability or any bit of instability, then they could take away my autonomy and my rights and lock me up, quote, for my own good, unquote, and to keep society safe from some weirdo like me. So this is where I needed to start building my support team. I needed to build up what I call my tribe of 5. These are my 5 closest people who I trust and believe will have my best interest at heart and tell me the truth, even if that is uncomfortable for me to hear in the moment. I needed to take a look at my professional team. And that, for me, includes my psychiatrist, who's difficult to reach, available in 15-minute increments and very expensive. My counselor or therapist, that's easier to reach, but only during business hours, unless I'm willing to pay those emergency rates, and still kind of pricey. My case manager or social worker, and I had this early in my recovery, but I haven't had one in a while since they think I'm well managed, and my peers. These are people with lived experience that can share their similar experiences and help me stay stable and manage things before they get to a crisis level. They're often available outside of traditional business hours, and they're the most affordable. They can remind me of skills I know and that I've learned in treatment to prevent further decompensation, and they can connect me to community resources or services. They can also tell me if something's outside of their scope and I actually do need to go to the emergency department, but lots of times they'll go with me if I need to. So going back to this, my treatment team, my professional team, safety plans, crisis management options, these are plans for what I want when I am in my right mind, if someone does need to make decisions for me temporarily. So I want to talk to you about some of the things that I do, lifestyle or behavior, that helps my recovery as well. And for me, that means having a routine. My routine includes medication. Take your meds daily. Don't stop when you feel better. The meds do work, and there is a right combination for each of us. Don't give up until you find it. You're worth it. For me, again, routine, keep it regular. I am so regular, I'm boring at this point, but it's really necessary because my disorder feeds on chaos. Sleep. Oh my God, sleep is so important. I need at least 6 hours of sleep. If you don't want me to be weird, average needs to be 8, and on the weekends, I might get 10. I'd like to also talk about nutrition. That's good quality food. It helps wellness. But I understand it's also a privilege to be able to afford this kind of food. Good food's kind of pricey, and produce goes bad easily. Processed and fast food is cheap, kids like it, and the 99-cent menu at the drive-thru will feed the family's belly, but not the soul. Many of us also live in food deserts where it's difficult to get access to good quality nutrition. But good quality food does improve my recovery. Another thing that I want to talk about the routine is exercise. You got to move. You got to move just a little at least. It gets the dopamine and the serotonin activated in your body. It's an adjunct to meds and services. It's not a replacement. But I think I need to take less meds because I implement exercise in my life. And the last thing that I want to talk about in the routine is lifestyle management. The social determinants of health, things like stable housing, basic needs, economic security, at least at a basic level. Financial literacy. It is no good having a great recovery plan if I can't afford to implement or access it. So all of these things in conjunction are the things that are behavioral that help augment my recovery. So the next thing that I want to talk about is who I am professionally and what I do. I work in behavioral health. I'm a substance use counselor. I've run recovery organizations, and I've utilized peers in emergency departments to intervene in acute episodes of behavioral health need. Once my own recovery was stabilized, I knew I wanted to work in behavioral health, helping other people recover by lowering barriers, reducing stigma, and connecting people to the right fit for their own values, goals, and recovery paths. I became a peer recovery supporter in 2007. And after a little bit, I became a consultant to other organizations in the state of Ohio who wanted to implement peers on their own teams. I became a peer supervisor to help build a qualified and competent peer workforce to serve more people needing the service. I became a trainer in several peer models and specialties within peer services so that we could train more peers to provide even more service to people. And then I became a substance use counselor because I wanted to understand how peer work served as an adjunct and an ally to clinical service, not a replacement, and what was involved in that. So with that, it included diagnosing, codes included in billing and charting, how to write treatment plans and do documentation, all the fun stuff in clinical services. A little bit later, a large behavioral health organization in my area that did both substance use and mental health, they wanted to open a recovery outreach center, and they hired me as a program administrator. And at that position, I was able to employ the largest team of peers working in my community. And we set up several hospital-based systems that we provided peer in the emergency departments when there was an acute episode of behavioral health need identified. With those patients, we provided them with some psychoeducation of the disorders that they were challenged with. We gave them a good understanding of what their options were for their next service. Probably most importantly, we connected them with empathetic support for their situation. Each individual, we tailored a person-centered and strength-based approach. We did everything that we did within a trauma-informed lens, do no harm. And we found that we were also very helpful to hospital staff in creating treatment plans, medical treatment plans that were amenable to the patient, and therefore they were more likely to be adhered to. This organization that I work for provided counseling and family support and med management through a nurse practitioner. But I think most importantly in that role, I learned how to operationalize a program. I learned more about billing. I learned insurance nuances and what was covered and what wasn't, and service caps and costs involved. And I really learned how to develop the care and feeding of an exhausted behavioral health peer staff, some of them managing their own personal recovery as well. I have always been a strong advocate for behavioral health needs, substance use disorder, trauma, and mental illness. And at this time, I started to realize how policy was interfering with good behavioral health practice, and that very often as providers, we're like so busy with our day-to-day existence that we get siloed and we don't collaborate with the other sectors as well as we could for the benefit of the patient. I realized a lot of times state or federal law would prevent us from doing our best work, and that agency procedure, in my case in Ohio, it's Ohio Administrative Codes, were often created decades ago and codified regulatory oversight into policy and procedure. Then we got HIPAA and 42 CFR, and these were great ideas, but all these years later, it's become less of an individual confidentiality issue and more of a fear-based reaction because of those 50K per infraction penalties, which make it dang near impossible for an individual to seek, access, and coordinate care for themselves easily. There, I said it. We have to see where policy and law is preventing the individual from truly being able to access the care and service they so deserve. I now work for the largest peer recovery organization in Ohio. We have the largest team of peers in the state, and I am the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy. I work to understand how all of the puzzle pieces fit into place. That's healthcare and medical, and how behavioral health issues and parity issues affect care. Um, these can be substance use disorder, mental health, trauma, or living in conjunction with all three. We take a look at the resources that individuals are bringing. We do a recovery capital index with each assessment. Um, we help to we help our people understand the disorders that they're challenged with and the recovery process they're facing. We navigate hurdles for insurance issues, and that can be at the CME level with Medicare and Medicaid, commercial insurance, the non insured. How do we get coverage for everybody who needs the service? What about deductibles and out of pocket costs and service caps? Again, that regulatory and legislative, local, state, and federal rules that kind of tie your hands sometimes about doing the kind of service that we know works. Everything that I do is always processed through the lens of what about somebody who's getting a diagnosis in 5 years? Will the road that they have towards their recovery be easier and smoother than someone who came before them? And that's what I do in policy and advocacy. So let me tell you a little bit about how this presentation came to be. I am decades away from my diagnosis. I have a great treatment team. I've developed good insight into my condition. I have good supports for my recovery. I have found the holy grail of medication for my personal quirky brain. And I have been stable for the past 5 years without needing a hospital intervention. So as a patient, I am pretty smooth sailing. I'm pretty easy at this point. In October of 2021, I accepted a new job. And what I didn't know was that my last job had some pretty great insurance coverage. And I had gotten kind of comfortable that that offering was kind of standard. So I did my due diligence. I found out the plan that the company offered. I looked up a formulary online. It looked like my providers were covered and my medicines were covered. So I really didn't think about it. But I had to wait 60 days for that insurance to become active. And so that was going to happen on December 4th. So when the insurance went live, I tried to use the app to find out what my out-of-pocket costs were going to be, what the deductible was, all the things in advance of needing to actually go pick up my next month of medication. But as many of us know, the billing departments for insurance is spot on, but the customer service department can be a little more lightweight in its development and in its priority focus. I find that my providers are covered, yay! But I can't again find the out-of-pocket cost it's going to cost me to see them. I found that my medications were covered, but I couldn't get a price for them either. But what the customer service rep told me was that even at the most expensive cost, it would probably be max $150 a month. So imagine my surprise on Monday, December 20th, 2021. I go to pick up my meds and I am informed that my meds are going to be $1,100 to pick up. $1,100. I can't afford that. That is a little bit outside of my price range. So here it is, the Monday before Christmas Day, and I have 5 doses of my atypical antipsychotic left. But I'm an advocate. I go into action. This is what I do. So I contact the insurance and I find out, is this a deductible issue? Is it a medication that's not covered at all? Is it covered but not preferred? And if so, what do they want me to take? And in my case, they did have a preferred medication and I could get that for $9 a month. But it was a medication that I had taken before and it didn't manage my symptoms very well. From previous experience, and it also had side effects like I gained a bunch of weight in a short period of time. So the side effects outweighed the benefits of the medication, and it wasn't something I was anxious to go on again. So I went back and tried to figure out what I was going to do about this whole situation. Um, I ended up calling the pharmaceutical manufacturer. I asked, do you have discount programs? Have you got any coupons? And they said, yes, we do have a coupon. It will give you $400 off. But at $1,100, taking $400 off is still $700 a month. And that's still outside my price range for a medication that I have to take daily, perhaps for the rest of my life. So this is where it got kind of interesting, because I'm thinking if I stop taking my meds within about 72 hours, historically, my symptoms come back. And within 6 weeks, I'm going to need a hospital intervention. And if I'm on the probationary period for this new job that I just got, I might miss work. And if I miss work, I could get fired. Now, if I get fired, I'm going to be eligible for Medicaid. And having been on Medicaid in my past, I know that this medicine is covered by Medicaid at 100% with zero out-of-pocket expenses. So it blows my mind that my commercial insurance will cover the cost of hospitalization after the deductible, which would be more than the 12-month cost of my medication if it was covered. This was a little bit exasperating for me, so I started to talk to my fellow bipolar cohort. And you know what they told me? They said that since I have severe and persistent mental illness, why bother working if it makes treatment more complicated? That this thing's complicated enough as is. But I like working. And I feel I have a unique set of skills that help us develop programs and services that increase chances of recovery for more people. I don't want to go on disability and I can work. But apparently, I can't afford the meds to keep me well if I do. So, it's the week before the holidays. Nobody is working. I try to get a hold of my doctor and the healthcare system. I want to ask if they have samples and what do they suggest I do if they don't. I eventually get a hold of someone from the health system that I get my behavioral health care from. And the lovely person answering the phone told me that it's not our problem if you can't afford your medication. You can imagine how well that went over with me. So I asked, what do I do when on Christmas Day I run out of my medication that keeps me well? And she indicated that if needed, I should go to the emergency department. So again, my insurance will cover, after deductible, some level of emergency acute care. But let's be honest, they're going to keep me for 72 hours, which will be covered by insurance, and then they're going to discharge me to an outpatient appointment several weeks later, because we all have workforce issues right now, and they're going to give me a prescription for a medication that I can't afford to pick up, or a medication that I can't afford but doesn't work well, or I get to try something new and we go on the trial and error medication roller coaster once again. This isn't a great system that we have, is it? But I'm tenacious. I won't go into everything that I tried in these 5 days to make sure that I had the medication needed to stay well, but some of the details include what we might describe as the gray areas of behavioral health. But I'm an advocate. I forge paths, sometimes where they haven't been forged before. But this is advocating for me, my own needs. I'm fiercer when I advocate for other people. I still have a little bit of internal shame that wonders, will anybody care? Do I really deserve good quality care, affordable and accessible services? I posted about my need, and I work in some circles of really good behavioral health providers. Some have their own agencies and center of support services. I was told by some of them that I could do a telehealth appointment. Thank God for telehealth expansion. I could do an intake at their agency, and they had samples. And once I had done the intake, I would be eligible to receive some of those samples. I had some other consumers of behavioral health reach out to me and said, "Hey, I've tried that med and it didn't work for me, but I still have it in my medicine cabinet, and I can meet you in a dark alley after dusk and make a shady, somewhat ethically, maybe legally murky transaction, but you'll have your meds." I held off on exploring this option because while it's a short term solution to my problem, I wanted to see if I could do this cleaner than that and maybe help create a new procedure that could help benefit others. I contacted one of my senators. Okay, maybe both of them. They have constituent liaisons. These are people who can reach out to the commercial insurance company and find out what's going on and see if they can make them feel a little bit of guilt and maybe cut me a break. You know, it's the holidays, Christmas spirit, and all that. Side note, commercial insurance companies do not feel any remorse and did not feel like extending any Christmas cheer my way. I did find out that my prescriptions would be covered with a $150 a month copay after I paid $3,500 in deductibles. And it was December 20th. And January 1st, that deductible was going to roll over and I was going to have to pay another $3,500. So that would have been like $7,000 in the first month. That's just too much for me. So I have 5 doses of medication. I run out on Christmas Day, and by New Year's, I'll be symptomatic and problematic. What did I do? I did that telehealth intake assessment with the new provider. I got access to 30 days of sample medication, and I bought myself a little bit of time, hoping that providers, pharmaceutical company, insurance people would be back in January, and I could sort it out at that point. But all this extra stress that I was dealing with during this time made me a little bit extra. Extra stress in my life produces symptoms of bipolar disorder. I got a little hypomanic and I had lots of energy and focus to work this problem out. I had a little bit of a conspiratorial flair of, you think you can keep me from being healthy, but you can't. And in this hypomanic state, it was also conference submission season. In a little bit of a ranting state, in probably about 15-minute stream of consciousness, I opened the online form to the Mental Health America conference event, and one of the topics for submission was lived experience with SMI. I didn't submit this as a professional. I didn't submit this on behalf of my company. I did this as an individual who's also a provider and works in behavioral health on the sometimes absurd journey we have to take just to stay well and to help as many others as I can do the same in their own lives. I know this presentation is important because it peels back what it's like to live with disorders like this. But it's also from someone who works within the system and knows why sometimes we have the policy and practices that we do that behavioral health operates like this. I know providers want to help as much as possible, but sometimes we often feel helpless to know how to help in the moment. So I was a little bit surprised when I found out that my conference submission had been accepted. I was a little intimidated at this point because then I thought about what it's really like to have to get up here and tell you about having a mental health disorder and to work in behavioral health. If I'm going to be honest, I feel a little naked up here. But I am from Northeastern Ohio, and I got to see the bravery of Dr. Fred Fries, a psychologist who lived with schizophrenia, and how he helped many providers develop insights and understanding in providing help. And many consumers, including myself, we developed a better understanding of living with our disorders because of Dr. Fred Friest. And we developed our voice of advocacy to help us and each other stay well. And if he could be brave enough to come out and address the stigma of having mental illness and contribute his brilliance and unique insight to the field, then I want to follow his example and do what I can as well. So while I have this captive audience, I wanted to go over a couple more things that we could learn as providers to deliver the best quality care. The first one is I'd like to talk a little bit about hospitalization. Grippy Sock Land, the resort, the spa weekend. First of all, I want you to know that this place is really boring. But this is where I go to when I am a danger to myself or others. Now collaborate with me on this one. Please, don't make any decisions for me. I know the answers to the hospital screening questions, quote, are you a danger to yourself or others, unquote. If I want to get out, I answer no, and they discharge me. It's an environment of reduced or eliminated harm, the half-inch light switches, shower nozzles and buttons, no shower rods, or privacy. Vinyl beds that are very crinkly, puce or mint or beige walls. Thin, easy to tear blankets, so we don't try to hang ourselves, and grippy socks. Did I mention it's boring? To entertain myself, there are a few options. There's a TV, which has never been the greatest option for me. I just never was able to get into it. There's a library, a little bookshelf. It's usually not too great. It's got some church materials, some hand-me-down magazines, a Bible, usually an AA book. Then they have arts and crafts. They got a box of crayons and some coloring sheets and the little stubby golf pencils. So to fill the time, I would take the thin blanket that they would give you and tie it around my shoulders like a cape. I would turn the grippy socks inside out, and then I would run down the corridor at high speeds and attempt to slide on the socks like a superhero, my cap flapping in the wind. It was regular stuff that if it was the regular staff, they would usually leave these antics and realize that I really didn't mean to cause any harm. And they would leave me alone. But if it was new staff or staff that would think that I would be inciting others to such rebellious behavior, then they would chase me down the hall, running after me to give me the booty juice. Now, booty juice is haloperidol, which is a sedative, and it is given in the buttocks. And this is problematic because it is the one medication that I'm allergic to, and it makes my throat swell shut. So now you actually have an emergency. So as a provider, I urge you to work with your people to find ways of exploring safety and crisis stabilization plans in advance of the needs with your people. Talk to us when we're in our right minds about what we want in terms of care in times of need. Do not strip me of my autonomy. Let's not make that first call to law enforcement or 911. That's a little extreme. Let's build out the systems for proper level of intervention and care. After all, 911 emergency response is expensive. We need more behavioral health options outside the emergency level of care. We need behavioral health urgent care centers. We need peer respite centers. We need more 24-hour living room style drop-ins. So I have one more thing that I want to talk about, and it's a little bit of a tough one, but I don't want you to panic. It's just a word. We have to talk about it, and it's a part of something that happens with SMI sometimes. Suicidality, suicidal ideations. Let's not trigger all the alarms, please, okay? And when I say this trigger word, let's not redirect every facet of our interaction and conversation from this word on to focus on adhering to the letter of the policies and the protocols when a trigger word like suicide gets implemented. And let's be real. Most of those policies and protocols are designed by lawyers, compliance officers, and administrators to cover the backside of you as a provider working in their organization. They're designed to reduce liability, not to enhance care. They are not designed to be person-centered or strength-based to the person exhibiting or communicating about this symptom. After all, I have a disorder that gives me very high highs and very low lows, and with this comes suicidal ideation at times. Now, I'm talking about me, an individual with my bipolar 1 with psychotic features diagnosis. When I'm up, sometimes I get the idea of putting a period on my life right then and there because, holy marbles, it is never going to get better than this. So why go on? But more often, it's after the high highs, the mania or the hypomania, when the low lows come back. Sometimes slow and sometimes fast, and sometimes it's like a head-on car crash into the darkness. Now keep in mind, my brain hurts after an episode of mania because it's been going so fast. The dopamine has ebbed, and my reactions just aren't as quick as before, and nothing makes as much sense as it did. And the darkness returns. I get the feeling of, oh, we're here again. It's exhausting and everything's an effort. And all the bad thoughts in my head of how I'm less than, or I'll never fit in or be accepted, or sometimes the backlash of some of the things I did or said while manic have come back to settle in my noggin and prattle on and on like some menacing inner voice, reminding me how flawed and disappointing I am. It's these times where it's much easier to slip into the dark surroundings of this depression and start to believe that there's no good reason to go on. I'm just a burden, a nuisance, and life would be easier for everyone without me. This is usually where I need my support team and my professionals, and often myself when I realize that I need to check in at a hospital for a few days while this gets sorted out. This is when I need protected from myself. The thing I want to stress here as a consumer is that when I'm talking about suicide or wanting to go to sleep and not wake up or not existing, any of the things we put into the screening tools and scales and questioning prompts to assess suicidality, I am actually not suicidal at all. I don't want to die. I have a feeling and I'm working with you to try and process that feeling, so that I don't need to act on it in any dysfunctional way. And please, maladaptive coping strategies come second nature to me. I have things like relationship issues, arguing with family, hypersexuality, illicit substance use, and self-harm. But again, I don't want to act on any of those either. My learning and living with good insight into my condition, I've learned to inhibit my impulses, to not give in to that first thought in my head about how to handle this situation, to explore where this thought is coming from and check it against reality. And sometimes I need others to do this because I am not the best judge of this if I'm symptomatic. I've learned that if you can't make a good decision, you don't have to make any decision at all, and you can postpone action. I've learned to check the efficacy of my meds. Sometimes it's as little as a manufacturer change in my pharmaceutical, or maybe not taking the dose at the same time of day. If I am telling you I'm having suicidal ideations, I am actively in the process of not trying to harm myself or act out in any dysfunctional way. I'm coming to you to help me with that. If, because you screened me into a high-risk category, you change our interaction, and at that point, you're only focusing on that trigger word and insulating from that instead of helping me get through the suicidal ideations and learn additional coping strategies and tools to help me stabilize. My psychiatrist and counselor both know that I am not an impulsive person at all. If anything, I'm methodical. I'll think things through a good long while before I move my chess piece. So they have learned to take that into consideration when I need to talk about suicidality. They know that in the years since my diagnosis and accepting of medication, that I've taken many mood stabilizers, antidepressants, sedatives, and antipsychotics. I have a passing fancy in neurochemistry and pharmacology, so I understand which ones dampen dopamine and which ones augment norepinephrine. And I ask questions of the people who went to school to get all those letters after their name over the years to learn which ones take me up, which ones slow me down, which ones make me gain weight without really doing what it's supposed to do, and which ones tickle my brain in a manner which I worry might wake up my inner addiction, so I really need to stay away from those. I want to stay well, and like anyone living with a chronic illness, I want to stay well as much as I can and to minimize any impairment or distress of being unwell. I come to you, dear providers, to help with all that. After all, I'm delusional and sometimes psychotic. I need all the backup I can get in this endeavor. But we've got to develop better insights as providers and more flexible policies as organizations. As an industry, more active listening skills when someone talks about suicidality, so we can get those feelings out in a safe way. And we can get options and game plans about how we aren't going to go any further down that dark road and what to do if the darkness creeps back in. If we're going to be real, you've got to understand you're never going to completely eliminate my risk. I have a disorder that makes me 10 to 30 times more likely to die by my own hand. But I am also committed to not adding my life to that statistic. I am committed to living as robustly as possible and to die young, as late in life as possible. So we have to have safe places to talk to you about how not to end our journey. If we sense we can't do that with you, or that our conversations completely change into a, quote, "Are you going to be okay?" unquote, and I have to protect you from yourself, then now let me keep this focus on my lived experience. If I can't have an open conversation with you about my suicidal ideations without triggering an involuntary evaluation at a psych ward, then I will stop saying that word around you. I will censor that triggering word you seem to overreact to, and I won't use you for my support team. I'll keep those thoughts to myself if I can, and I'll try and figure it out on my own, which really isn't the greatest idea, and it's why we pay you as professionals to help us do that. Please know, we can do better by people with SMI who have suicidal ideations. Let's create safe spaces to talk. In the last few minutes I have you, I want to talk to us as a sector. We've got to realize that we don't provide behavioral health care in a vacuum. We've got to see our service as part of the continuum of care in a person's life. Meds aren't going to have much efficacy if I continue to smoke methamphetamine, and counseling isn't going to do much good if in between sessions I get into fights with the cops and get arrested all the time. I'm not even going to go to counseling if work won't give me the time off, and I'm not going to spend my time and money on psychiatry if I don't have food security. Learn about your therapeutic interventions in the context and continuum of the people you serve's lives. And is this realistic for them? I want to encourage you to talk amongst yourselves as professionals and with administrators and with compliance and with all the other providers at other agencies, and compare notes, and let's raise the bar for what we do. And let's also find out why it's hard for our people to, quote, comply with the treatment plans we're recommending for them. Let's get out of our silos and talk to the other sectors. Talk to criminal justice. Law enforcement and first responders certainly have lots of contact with us, as do hospitals and healthcare systems, and child welfare and family service and faith-based organization and churches. And then there's public health. Let's see how other systems work and interface with the people that we serve. And maybe there's opportunities to partner so that we can all do better service and create better systems. And if we do this, everyone wins. We need to realize that we can provide the best individual care, but that exists within the continuum of administrators, payers, symptoms and insight, goals and motivations of the individuals living with these disorders. So I want to thank you for listening to me today. A little hypomania can go a long way. A passion to keep myself well, and realizing the irony of the barriers within our system that prevents us from really being able to affect long lasting changes in the people we serve's lives. I want to leave you with a curiosity about how small changes can help us deliver more understanding in our service and better continuity in our care, and encourage that you be brave enough to know that we can make a difference in people's lives. We can enact changes and make quality care available to more people, and lives will improve. And when that happens, it feels really, really good. Thank you so much.